Bet.
All right, Ron Newcomb here with my new friend Tom Barile. We are going to be talking filmmaking stuff, and everything around filmmaking, from funding to post production. Because you have some good experience in post, so I want to try to take advantage of that. But before we get too far down the road of side quest, can you maybe set us up with an origin story of how did you get started on the filmmaking and storytelling journey?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me, Ron. It's really nice to meet you and being on the program. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a good part of almost 2 decades. I got into filmmaking through obviously going to film school back in 2005, 2006, and I kind of went head first into the industry after getting out of school. Tried about everything. I PA'd, I worked in the camera department. I was kind of young and eager, found my way working for a production company as an intern, and that's really what turned me on to post production. I got in kind of early on as an assistant editor. Always really liked editing in general. I did a lot of side editing myself. And through there, I kind of cut my teeth. And around that time in the mid 2000s was kind of the big changeover to digital cinema. And I found myself in a position where they were asking for a lot of on-set editors. So I kind of bridged the gap, was already kind of doing both things and would just show up on set. I turned into then being a media manager. And then that kind of helped me move into really kind of the breadth of my career, which was as a DIT after that. So obviously the need for color correction on set became a thing, those worlds combined. And I found myself having that career for a solid 8 or so years. And then I got a job working for Panavision's post production company, Light Iron, in 2017. And found myself working on features and episodic films as a dailies colorist. And really, my journey from there has been kind of moving into the post production leadership role. I helped eventually run uh, the dailies department at Light Iron for the years that I was there, as well as the department supervisor. And now I find myself doing similar things, but have kind of moved into a more leadership role as an executive producer at a company called Nice Shoes, which our main facility is located in New York City. And we are a creative post production company. So we work on things from features to episodic to independent film. And here I am today.
Awesome. Nice rundown. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
Um, Now we can go in any direction that you feel like is going to be beneficial to the audience. The audience base is predominantly indie filmmakers and
Okay.
creatives in that vein. Most of them have some semblance of experience, so you don't need to start from speak like ground zero.
Okay.
But I do find that the little nuggets that people may assume people know that they do find valuable. So I also know that on everybody's journey, the one commonality is they're all different.
Right.
But I kind of feel like, as us now looking back, kind of behind us, that it's important to leave enough breadcrumbs so at least people can see the way that we went, and then they can make their own origin story, but at least know a path forward in that direction. So if you were starting again today in 2025, what might you do differently, or what might you be thinking about, or what direction? Like, for instance, film school is a hot topic, good, bad, or indifferent. It's out there. Just any thoughts about where you would start today?
I mean, great question. I mean, obviously, from the time I had an interest of getting into the industry, and I did, again, which was about 2000. I went to film school, started film school in about 2003, got out about 2006. I even found myself then in this strange crossroad of a disruptor kind of dropping in, which was digital cinema. Up until then, there was this kind of romance with film. I mean, I guess, before everybody was calling themselves cinephiles, I think that was me. I loved the creative art of filmmaking, and I dreamed about working on film. I dreamed about changing 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter film. Film was tangible. It was cool. It was the way things were done, but then harkened in this disruptor with digital cinema. So like I just found that like I kind of went with the flow. I kind of embraced the changes and understood that here's the direction that the industry was going in, and it did, and it stuck. And digital cinema, even to this day, is really the main way a lot of things are made. I think the difference with today is now we have this new kind of disruptor, which is AI. And I think a lot of people are wondering if it's friend or foe. And I'm sure that's probably where the film school question comes like, why do I need to go to film school? Do I need an education? More than ever, I think filmmakers, people that are trying to be creative, they have so many tools to their disposal. So it's kind of exciting. Looking back at myself in the early 2000s, I really didn't have that. I had a camera, I had my imagination. People were still shooting and digitizing on tape. But I think the tools are incredible nowadays. If I were to jump back into it now, I feel like I would really try to pay attention to the new tools, try to pay attention to the new workflows. And it's wonderful to see so many examples. I mean, obviously, with people having success in self distribution. But I do think it's a cool time to create. And the one thing that I think is no different for me now than it was then is as a creative person, I think it's always important to, as I say, ABC, always be creating. And if it's just making sure, if it's playing around with AI, you have more tools again than ever to get your idea out there. So, I would just obviously head into a lot of the fun tools that are out there and trying to see how I could make them work for myself. And I find myself doing that now. Obviously, it's not a full-time job, but my just kind of creative interest always draws me toward what's the new fun thing that people are playing with and having success with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's great, and I fully embrace that and am here for that ride too. Um, so I used to be a police officer, and we used to watch videos where officers, unfortunately, were killed in a line of duty. And the idea was to not Monday morning quarterback the officer, but to learn from them so that it didn't happen to us. And they were not easy to watch, as you can imagine. So
Sure.
I bring this next question up, not from a sense of like, hey, let's point out wrongs of people and we'll sit on this side of the fence and mock them and laugh them. It really comes from, can we see the pitfalls of others and learn from that so that we ourselves don't fall into that? So it's kind of a two-part question. The first one is, where do you see the biggest mistakes or where indie filmmakers are blowing it? And then where do you see Hollywood blowing it? So the mistakes of the indie and then the mistakes of the Hollywood
Yeah.
system.
Great questions. Yeah. I mean, we could start off with Hollywood. I mean, I don't think if you're in this industry, I don't think anybody can turn a blind eye to the current conditions and climate of the industry. I think it's a different animal right now. It's definitely, as I've talked to people, I think we like to say it's having a little bit of an identity crisis as to
Yes.
what Hollywood 2.0 is going to look like. Um, when it comes to its mistakes, I think these are all mistakes that have been laid down over the past few decades, and like a lot of industries, the creative industry, TV, film is kind of no different in the terms of it has to turn profit. And obviously, I think Hollywood got to a point where it thought it was just too big to fail. And the one thing that it didn't count on was the change in attention spans and how generationally over time it would show how people would lose interest in going to the traditional money makers that Hollywood always had, like going to a movie theater or home video distribution, video stores. And you saw these things kind of fall off over time. And I just think what we're seeing now is just, I can't be one to say that we ended things too early. I'm not obviously in any position in the industry to make those decisions, but I do think that it is just, we're learning hard lessons in the idea of how to evolve with our viewership and also kind of like the trickle down economics of Hollywood and how everybody feels they're getting a stake in what they're working on. And again, just being able to survive in a tough industry as a living creative has just gotten harder too. So the thing you're putting all your time and your energy and your money into isn't really giving back to you. So I think that's a huge hardship that Hollywood is struggling with right now. And I'm hoping that we do see us kind of move past this disruptor, which I guess we could call AI right now, and kind of use it as a collaborator and not a conqueror, you know? And then when it turns the side over to indie film, you know, in my job, I have the privilege of working with a lot of indie filmmakers. I would say our company does kind of the indie film collaboration right. I think indie filmmakers are in a very unique position. There's a lot of risk in indie filmmaking just because obviously there's a lot of money involved in making films the right way, in sense of having a sustainable budget that can make a film and putting that film out there, distributing it, getting eyeballs on it. I think that when it comes to trying to solo out mistakes that certain filmmakers have made throughout my experience working with them, I'm not really sure if I can pinpoint one, but, I've always been of the kind of mentality that your story starts with your script. No matter what you're gonna sprinkle on top of it visually, you could have the greatest DP in the world, you could have the greatest VFX team in the world. But if you're gonna embark out and create something as a calling card, as a first-time filmmaker, I do think the importance really lay in your story, in the uniqueness of it, and in your voice and your style, really shining through. So, again, like I don't typically get a lot of time, especially in post production. We don't have time to like, here's the script. You're just getting kind of the material. You're getting the finished material, and then you're polishing it and you're getting it ready for distribution. But there's sometimes I watch things and I want to say, man, I would love to see what this script looked like. So I'm a stickler with that, and I also like, I novicely also try to still write and read screenplays. So I'm always drawn to really incredible stories on the page, and I always just tell anybody, like, if you want to make something, try to write it as well. And obviously, your first thing, it may not be your breakthrough, but learning to hone your writing skills and putting everything on the page is important. So I think, you can practice filmmaking as much as you want, but practice your writing too, because it really shines through to your finished product. It would be my thing. I see, I guess, blanketed overall in the majority of things we touch and work on.
Yeah, I'm actually rereading Save the Cat for the whatever time, just
Love it.
because, writing is, well, we all know that story is king. We're all taught that, early
Right.
on in our filmmaking. We all know that buzz phrase, and yet few people still kind of put the time in to do it. And you
Yeah.
don't have to be a writer to write. If you're a storyteller, you should learn the writing process. That is story. And you need to know, for heaven's sake, just like in Save the Cat, that there are ways that people consume stories. And
Mhm.
I know people balk at it at times, that they don't want to get put into a box or a framework, or God forbid, a structure. Yet that's the way we consume media. And one of the ways that I think independents blow it, and we have to own this, is we do things so outside the box that it resonates with no one, and then we blame the Hollywood system for their failure of their film. And that's hard to say, because I'm speaking right from the heart here. This is me. I'm not pointing fingers out. I'm like, I did a film called The Rangers. It was a pilot episode, and it was so convoluted and complex, I couldn't even follow it at the end. I was like, what did I do? It was supposed to be a pilot episode, so there was a lot of cliffhangers. But I'm telling you, Tom, if you went and looked at it, you'd be like, I don't know. Like, you knew
I'm
who
in the
the
same
POV
boat.
was. Exactly. I had fun in the writing. Next thing I know, it just went crazy, and I didn't zero down the basics. What do they want? What's their goal? What's the objective? What's preventing them? It was all crazy convoluted, and we do need to go back to the basics, and that is story, and story is writing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And we all as filmmakers beat ourselves up. Believe me, I have plenty of ventures I've made in the past where I watch them now and I say, yeah, I'm not sure if what I was thinking on the page really translated there. And it's the big lesson I think for writers too is like, screenwriting is a really particular style. And I think that like the one hardship I always had with screenwriting was like, I think it's like sometimes you go in and you read books, you read the Save the Cats, you read all these other kinds of really great texts that have come out on screenwriting. And obviously there's a format, but I do think that sometimes what happens is you also become a slave to the format, like, and that's kind of where especially if you're going to write something as a filmmaker and say you have the boldness to say, maybe I won't make this, but I could option this or I could sell this thing. It is really trying to write your piece in that mentality where it is universal, where anybody could pick it up, could read it, and could generate the emotions and kinds of feelings that you had intended when you were telling that story. So like I find myself now, if I watch like a really good movie nowadays or something that captivates me, I immediately try to go find the screenplay. One that I did most recently was The Substance. Have you seen
Hmm.
The Substance?
No, not yet. I'm gonna put that.
Yeah, it was just kind of one of those movies that obviously it kind of got a lot of talk. Demi Moore getting, an award nomination, and obviously I think kind of the shock value of the film. If you're a horror person, it may not be your bag, but it was visually the kind of storytelling that I watched that it just intrigued me to go like, what did this look like on the page? And when I went back and read the screenplay, it was exactly almost like what I was watching. And to me, that is such a great connection between a writer director kind of really nailing it there on the page and how well that was communicated into what it was made into eventually. So again, I think everybody can write as much as you want. It's always, I was saying, always be creating. You should always be writing too, if that's part of your creative process. But just keep going until you find your voice. And when you do, it's an exciting experience. And I guess that's the gift that writing gives back to you kind of instantly is when you can read a couple pages of what you've written and go, I'm into this. This is what I've intended, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And what a compliment to the writer that you a lot of times people are like, I wonder if they intended that. And
Yeah.
usually the filmmaker did, either the director or the writer. And if it's the writer, it'd be good for them to be because we all know that films, again, this is another one we all have heard, gets made three times, in writing, in production, and in post. But it is so true. Like every film I've ever done does not look like fully the script, like page to page. It's completely different and changes and nuances, particularly in the indie world, because sometimes, you lose a location or you don't have the funds for something that you thought you were going to have. So, and I definitely, just like how I think every director should take an acting course, I think everyone should be writing. And I also think, even if it's just for fun creatively, and then I also think everyone that is listening right here on this should consider themselves a producer.
Oh,
Consider
yeah.
yourselves a producer.
Very
Every
smart.
smart filmmaker out there, they all own production companies, are pushing their own stuff, they're getting their stuff made. All the actors, people are like, well, I'm just an actor. No, the moment you say just, you're wrong. Like, look at all the actors out there that have a good career path. They all at this point own their own production companies and they're
Absolutely.
running stuff through. So all right, I'm going to tee something up, and it's either going to be a softball or it might not. It's going to go one way or the other. It's not
Okay.
going to fall in the middle. So here we go. This is a true scenario that happened to me, so I'm going to give it to you, and I'd
Okay.
love your input on what to do.
Sure.
You're given $200,000 cash, 200K. What do you do? Is there a particular strategy you try to deploy? Is there a genre? Is this something like I find this a lot with indie filmmakers? They're like, I've got a little bit of money. What do I do? Do I lock up a casting director and go secure a talent? Do I buy IP? Like, what's the play? Or is it just, what are you talking about? Get your butt off the couch and go to Atlanta and film a movie. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
What's the play for 200K?
Great question. Well, I think, I mean, if I were to say get myself in the filmmaker mindset, I think like nowadays, I think, sure, like if you told anybody 200,000, they may be like, "Oh, that's not enough." But the fact that you even have money is now kind of an opportunity to be resourceful. And I
Right.
think you have to be resourceful before you go ahead and just start cashing checks, that you can't basically write. I mean, I would say that like if I were an indie filmmaker today and I knew I had a bottom line of 200,000 and I was going into, for instance, writing the script, I would really try to keep my story simple in terms of location, in terms of character, for one, that's going to keep everything fairly reasonable in my budget. I think, a solo location is fantastic if you can kind of wrap your story around that, a minimal cast. Obviously, I don't think I don't it's the classic. I'm not sure you want to work with children all the time. I'm not sure you want to work with dogs all the time. I'm not sure you want to give yourself the burden of heavy VFX laden work. If you want to put some finishing touches in that, you can maybe configure what a kind of put aside a post-production budget if you'd like to have somebody obviously do a sound sweetening mix or a finishing color pass on things, which seem to be kind of the norm nowadays. And then just figuring out how you can basically get a solid enough crew for a solid enough piece of time. Obviously, if you want to work with professionals, you got to work around their schedules. I would assume most people doing indie films are trying to, hey, we're going to do a couple weekends in a row to get this done, or we're going to block out a 3 day span and go gangbusters and try to get it done in a location. But I think just pulling back from what I originally said is I would just really try to make my story encompass the simplicity of one location, the simplicity of a smaller cast, and really try to get it done under that limitation of 200,000.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, just take what you got and go for it. Particularly if you're an indie, and when I say indie too, for the listeners, the bulk of my listeners, Tom, are above the age of 50, which I find pretty interesting.
Hmm.
So,
Love it.
it's a lot of times people are like retired. They had to give up that script or screenplay or idea of, man, I want to be a filmmaker one day. And it was way back in the film world, like you talked about, because I lived in that era too. And then they find themselves 50 and above now. They might be retired. All their kids are out of the house. They might have disposable income. They sacrifice to raise their family. And suddenly here they are. And that, boom, it hits them again. They want to tell that story. And if you have 200,000, that is an opportunity to get out there and tell your story. I think it running lean, it can be done. You just need to, like Tom laid out, the definite Tarantino one location moment, comes to mind. You need to justify it in the story by the writing, but if you can justify it in a unique and cool way, like, oh, okay, this is why they can't leave, or this is why, I mean, that's what the whole premise of Saw was about, like let's literally chain them to a location. And now the
Perfect.
audience is like, they can't go anywhere. And they're totally justified of why we're not seeing all these epic, great locations.
Absolutely. And I think like you do see like a lot of indie filmmakers too lean sometimes into the horror genre. I think
Mhm.
you can get clever with the horror genre. I think you can get clever with the thriller genre. I mean, look, I think that if you have the determination and the mindset that you have some of those limitations, I think filmmakers thrive in limitation, especially indie filmmakers. That's why you see like a lot of these powerhouses that have, really catapulted into the industry. They came from making stuff with nothing because then when you have everything, my God, right? Like you can really stretch a buck and you've already kind of you've exercised that muscle before that has put you in tight situations. But I have found personally that sometimes some of the greatest creative decisions you'll ever make are when you're backed into a corner as a filmmaker.
Well, yeah, and every film wants more money. Every film wants more money, and they think they need it. And yet the creativity comes out when you're forced not to. I mean, heck, even Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
I remember the origin story there. They were over there scouting locations and they had to use a fictitious name because they didn't want people going, oh my God, this is Star Wars. And then
right.
pick up their prices and float the budget way high. So if these guys have to kind of play it small, there's a time to play it big and a time to play it small. And sometimes,
Yeah.
particularly when you're shooting the 200K, you're out there location scouting, whatever, it's the time to play it small. All right, so another one here. Does star power matter in 2025? Does star power matter in 2025? And I don't necessarily mean we could take that in any direction. It doesn't necessarily mean just the actor, but does star power matter?
Great question again. I think in this current climate, if you're in Hollywood, if you're making a major motion picture for a large streamer, for a large studio, a large entity, yes. And I think we're in the era that IP matters and sells, and star power matters and sells. I think you find a couple of indies that will nab somebody unexpectedly that you're like, wow, that person had time to do an indie and really liked the script, or they were a friend of a friend. And obviously, it never hurts to put Dwayne Johnson on your movie poster. And obviously that probably commands and brings in a built-in audience, just like IP does. So I think the unfortunate answer is if you're like the person that just got their script option by Netflix and you're ready to make your film, I'm pretty sure you have an A-lister or somebody that is somewhat of a household name that may appear in your film. But I do think if you're an indie filmmaker, that's a 50-50 shot if you have that luxury. But I do think what we see a lot of, and this harkens back to what we just said about like if the story is good, it kind of doesn't matter who you're watching. And the nice part about that is that then brings the concept of like the breakout stars, like everybody started somewhere. Like you think back to like Memento and Guy Pearce, right? Like
Yep.
Christopher Nolan is not a household name. He makes this film. Sure, Guy Pearce is an Australian actor. He had acted before, but it was like don't know this guy from anybody else. But guess what? He's the guy in Memento now, and now he's catapulted to being a massive household name and star. So again, I think going back to just like get a great story, even if it's your best friend who's an actor that's available. You can make the story shine through and work, but I do think if you're at kind of playing in the bigger leagues right now, I think there are probably a few exceptions that you have to make in order for people to be fully behind it and backed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you're playing in the upper leagues, it's funny. It's star power has never been more important and IP. And yet, if
Yes.
you're playing in the lower rungs where I live, in my opinion, star power is no longer as important as it was. And I give you Squid Games, for instance, I call this new thing spectacle. You got to have spectacle. Now, that could be an A-list actor, or that could be some visual effects element that just blows your mind, or that could be an idea or concept like Kingdom. I don't know if you saw that also. It's a historical fiction in Korea back in, the old times, and it's a zombie flick, and
I did see
amazing.
its time on Netflix was heralded, but
Yeah.
it's on my obvious very long to watch
Yeah,
list.
to
But
do
there
list. Oh,
but
you
there
should
you go.
that,
It's one of
yeah,
those things.
yeah, you should jump that one up for sure. It's a fun one.
Fantastic.
And I'm not a huge zombie one, but I am a historical guy. So when I saw that, it
Love
was
that.
so good. I
It's
know,
good and
like no
different,
surprises.
and
Yeah,
different. And I think, and I think like nowadays, that's, in the comparison between like harnessing star power and IP. I mean, I think like you see these people that are independent filmmakers that want to take the step up to the next level. And a lot of it is like, what kind of IP do you have? And like, if you can show somebody like, look, I made this really intriguing short film. It's got a dense, rich universe. It's got characters. Because I do think that's what we're not paying attention to is ushering in the new generation of IP.
I
The
agree.
IP that seems to be very much reconjured, rebooted, repackaged is just it's my IP, is what I like to say. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And I think what's funny is we're, Hollywood, the streamers, everybody wants their hands on the IP that they feel has this kind of prepackaged audience. But again, it's my generation that are probably still filling seats in movie theaters, buying physical media. So I always ask like, who are we making these things for anymore?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point. All right, so we all know there's a saying in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. And if nobody knows anything, what gets you excited about a project? And then maybe a follow-up that's kind of similar to that. What gets you excited about a project? And then how do you personally gauge if a project will succeed or not? So if someone is trying to bring Tom on to help, produce this thing. So what gets you excited? And then how do you gauge of like, okay, this has something?
Right. I mean, again, I think if I were brought on to any kind of project and the proximity of, hey, do you want to help produce this? You want to help post produce this? Obviously, if it's post produced, obviously it's pretty much done. So, hey, can you watch this and take a look at it, see what kinds of elements you can help punch up, and obviously, can you help us with our budget, make this work? That in terms of, the comparison of like, here's a script, we're getting ready to make this. Do you want to come on and help produce this? I think the script, like we said, always is the first thing to draw me into a project. If I'm reading something and it's a great script, of course there's excitement behind it because there's the what if. The second thing is definitely the creative force behind it. It's usually the writer, director, or two separate people. But, really the director is the person kind of steering the creative ship, especially in its really most important time, which is during production. So, I think I've had really good feelings collaborating and working with people that I just felt like they have a certain aura about them. They have a certain passion that really shines through. Again, I think another very valuable lesson to any indie filmmaker is you should wear your passion. You should wear your passion as much as you can in meetings with people. And it may not even just be talking about the thing you're working on now. It's your just overall passion of being a filmmaking, person in this world, because it is, man, that a lot of love, a lot of time and dedication goes into this. And it's all about, I think, for the right reasons when I tend to work for people. If I'm just working with somebody that just is like, it's a Hail Mary, they want to make money off of this, they want to have a cash cow. Well, first of all, I don't think this is the industry to play that kind of betting game on anymore. But if
Yeah,
you come in and you're a passionate creative and you have a great idea and you're ready to go for it, typically I'm pretty sold when it comes to that kind of thing.
I like it. Yeah, no, I think passion, excitement, it does breed off and flows onto other people. And we get excited seeing it through their eyes. It's different if I like look at a piece of art on the wall versus the having the artist right there explaining to me the painting and the passion and what it means and the little nuances. Suddenly I'm seeing it through their lens. And as storytellers and filmmakers, when we're pitching our stuff, we should be doing the same thing, not passively like, hey, you want to help me out here? It's like really creatively share your vision with them and let them get on the train with you to tell the story.
Absolutely. And that's just it. It's like a creative partnership is different than really lots of different kinds of partnerships you can have in business. I mean, sure, if there's a financial partnership, I can understand that. But when you're sharing a creative journey with somebody, it's very potent, it's very real, and most of these things need a leader, and the leader is in kind of, I mean, when it comes to the hierarchy on a set, sure, there's all the kind of the standard ideas of the producer and the director, but there really needs to be a heart of the film, and typically, like I said, if that is a first-time filmmaker, writer, director, you really look to that person to really inspire everybody because these are tough circumstances to get through, like we're saying before, if you have only $200,000, you're counting down your dollars every day to make sure that you can get this out there. So sometimes it can be a rocky road and you just need that kind of shining light to bring it to its fruition.
I like it. Yep, completely agree. No project goes according to plan. There's always challenges. Can you maybe talk about a challenge within a project that you've had and how did you push through it? So a challenge that you faced, you overcame it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in this industry, working in this industry, I think once a week there's always a couple really big things that fall into place, especially working in post production. It's a handoff kind of work of just here's everything we've done. Now you have to obviously make it better. Lots of collaboration comes into there. And I think from like what we do is, we're always trying to reach across the aisle. We're trying to help our collaborators make sure they give us everything we need. But as weeks go on, you don't. You're realizing that you have a mishmash of different kinds of footage sometimes going into things, like especially if you work with a documentarian or you're doing just a straight documentary film. You're talking about just like hard drives and hard drives of acquired footage, of different, resolutions of footage. That tends to be a larger hardship than I would have ever thought it would be before I kind of got into this kind of work. But it's finding quick creative solutions in things. Sometimes it's setting different expectations for filmmakers, that come in and had this envisionment of how this would maybe look. And then you get to kind of a final edit note pass and they're just like, oh, I didn't think it would look like that. And then it's kind of like, well, we need to take a step back to make sure they're happy. But obviously, we have technical limitations. So let's try and find a happy medium that still does what you want it to do. I see a lot of that in post production. When it comes to just like the production sides of things or independent stuff, I've had the pleasure of being involved in. I do think a lot of it just comes down to random things happening. We lost a location. It's not as much money as we thought it would be. Um, we only have the editor for 3 days. You name whatever the problem is, and what I've always just found is a pivot. You have to have a pivot because you don't have time to sit around and wait. And a lot of those pivots were either like, fine, I'll do it, or just by the will of everyone coming together, you were able to scrap together a good solution and get it out the door. So, I mean, I can't stress enough how many times I've done that working on independent films, where it's just like, hey, it's end of the line. It's time for a decision. Either who's going to do it or, you know, this doesn't move any further. So you
Yeah.
just got to be the solution, not the problem.
There you go. Yeah, I have a Ronism, and it's a film will fight you every step of the way. It's your job to pull it into existence, but it will try to fight you not to be born into this world, and you have to pull it over the goal line.
I love that. It's so true.
Um, I, being 52, I have I'm married with five little ones, and so this question is an important one to me. How do you believe one main or should maintain or does maintain longevity in this industry and even contentment in the industry? So longevity and contentment. What are your thoughts around those?
Great questions, by the way. Um, yeah, two really important things. I think, it's funny. Like when I got into this, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And there's a part of me that obviously I still always want to be a filmmaker. It's kind of like the kid who's like, I want to be an astronaut. And then you're an astronaut. And you're like, yeah, you have to find love in what you do. I think my challenge is I got into this industry and I can't deny that it is a job. It's a resource for me. It's how I make my money. It's how I live my life. It was a choice that I made, but I do think that like it can be taxing. It can be demoralizing, like anything, like any job you work. It has its ups and downs. It goes back to that ABC. I think like the love of creating is something you need to keep alive in yourself, right? And even if you're just tired of filmmaking, even if you just want to pick something up, oh, I want to play with Mid Journey and Runway, and I want to just try to make something. I want to experiment with a new piece of software and see how I can take my creativity to a new level. I think always keeping yourself kind of primed like that is a way to keep the passion alive, And I think that you see filmmakers who have like really lasted the test of time. And I mean, you look at like the Scorseses and the Spielbergs and stuff, and these are guys who have transcended tons of disruptions in the industry. They
Yeah,
went from
right.
being the film guys to then, hey, we're going to shoot digital, and hey, we're going to put our movies on streaming. And, I'm sure for them over time, it got harder to make films as it has now. It's not just like you roll in there with the cachet that I'm Steven Spielberg, which I'm sure he does, and he still gets to make movies. But, the gatekeeping has become harder and harder. But if you're a person working now, I think, again, it's just like you have to block out the noise and just continue doing what you love. I mean, it might be, which sometimes it is very doom and gloom. You read a lot of things on these social networks of just kind of like Hollywood is dying and this is changing. These are the growing pains and the turning points. Pretty much, this happens a lot in this industry, and you just have to personally find a way to love it again. And I don't know if there's a one size fits all, but look, if you are a creative person, I think you find ways back to your creativity, and you do find ways back into kind of loving what you do, just over time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, I have been there where I was like, man, if I could just be working on set, and then I was working on set, but it was somebody else's stuff, and it
Mhm.
just felt like another job, and you do have to remind yourself and remember. I always tell people that, I've dug ditches So I know what hard work is, and I'm not doing that. I need to remind myself, like we're on set. That's the sizzle. If you can't have fun on set, then you probably are not in the right industry. You're
Yeah.
going to be exhausted when you're done, but it's going to be a good exhausted. If it's a bad exhausted, you should probably go change careers.
Great advice. Yeah. And it is. It's just kind of like you'll know if it's for you.
Yeah.
I've always said I've had a lot of people go, how do I get into this? How do I know if it's for me? And I just say, spend a day on set and
Yeah.
see what
Feel
it's
it.
like. And there's an energy that is
Yeah.
there. There's this amazing kind of underlying flow of creativity. It's really the ultimate form of collaboration. And I think truly I would tell anybody this that if you want to be kind of the loan shark and do everything yourself, there's admiration to that and power to you. But I do think the real power of being a good filmmaker is understanding that like it takes a village to make your product. And if you want to see that, go on any major film that's shooting right now, and you're counting hundreds of people that are doing, like you're saying, digging ditches, laying down cable, sewing, painting, putting makeup on people. It is a act of passion, creativity, and love that some days you leave set going, why the hell am I doing this? And then you go back the next day and you're just reinvigorated again.
Yeah.
It's a wild aura and energy in making film. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, again, you're going to be tired. You're either going to be a bad tired or a good tired. And if you're good tired, then you're probably a filmmaker.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what's the thing that made it possible for you to succeed? What's the thing that made it possible for you to succeed?
Um, Being able to bet on myself. And I've learned to get better at that as I've become older and as I have become more ambitious, as I have wanted other things in my life. I have found that you have to get comfortable with doing that. And that's either you going to in any part of your life, you going to show up for the job that you want, going to make the story that you just wrote, finishing the painting that's been sitting on the easel. I just think that like you really have to, because betting on yourself is the willingness to fail, right? Like failure's scary. We all look up that mountain every day sometimes and go, oh man, I might fail today. But it is just kind of going like, it's okay. I bet on myself. And sometimes that pays off and it just gives you kind of another feeling of security, another feeling of self-worth. And, after doing that for years, you just eventually show up every day and say, I got this. I can do this.
Yeah.
So I do think that like I have had wonderful people in my life, role models, family members, and friends that I've watched do similar things and bet on themselves. And I see that kind of confidence and that kind of confidence pay off. And I'm just lucky that I can still kind of embrace that mindset even today and try still to bet on myself, whether it's professionally or creatively.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, there's been times where I will get, every project I get involved with, there's always the willingness, desire. I love the fact that how many people you get involved and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, secretly kind of deep down, I'm like, dang, I kind of wanted to do that or that I can do that or that, and I started to now at this point in my life to allow myself those things to do. Like
That's awesome.
it isn't just about creating stuff for others, but you have to get some enjoyment, some element out of it also. And
Yeah.
so allowing yourself to actually enjoy the process is not shortchanging others, it's just shortchanging yourself. And if you're not motivated and encouraged, because it's hard enough to do these things,
Yeah.
each endeavor is an entrepreneurial, independent thing in and of itself. So again, you got to pull it into existence. So I really like what you said there because I find myself more and more, and it's not about ego. It's about, a lot of other people have had the chance and opportunity to do this, and I'm going to give myself the opportunity to do it because I believe I can. If I don't feel like I can, I will go to others. But if I feel like, no, I think I got this, that's how directing started for me.
Cool.
And no one feels like they're going to be a director. You got to just step up and be like, you know what, I'm going to do it. So,
Yeah,
um,
I really love that sentiment. And it's I think too like yeah, nobody, I mean, I think like when I started off, sure, like going into film school, like the idea of, in the ages of the Quentin Tarantinos and the Robert Rodriguez's and Eli Roths, it was all like, yeah, you can be this kind of like maverick writer director kind of person. And nobody's saying that you still can't. But I think like, what I have seen too is great directors are great listeners,
Yeah.
because like you're saying, like you have to learn as you go through this. And sometimes you're fortunate enough to have brought in a seasoned vet, say you got a killer art director, like granted, sure, you could sit and tell a person that you've hired how to do things, but there's a whole other mystique of somebody telling you the best way to do it. And you're learning as you're going on. So I do think the acceptance of just like you may not be the smartest, you may not be the most experienced in the room, but lean on your collaborators and you're going to even if that you walk away from that project and it's not a success, what you have walked away from is learning a new skill set. I
Yeah.
like that a lot in my life. And as I get older, I'm looking at it that way too, where it's just like I enjoy sitting and feeling the energy and the education from somebody, because it's just going to give you a level up on the next decision you make on the next kind of creative endeavor that you go after.
Yeah, Alex Ramosi, he owns acquisitions.com and his wife, and he's become pretty famous. Um, yeah, that's definitely kind of what he himself talks about with that. So, I want to ask, we just have a few more questions to kind of wrap
Sure.
up. Are there any books, training, or workshops that were game changers for you that you would recommend? I'm a big reader, so any books, but we can also talk about training or workshops that you've done that were, made a difference.
Yeah, yeah. I would say like for most of what I have done in post-production in my journey, I either learned by watching other people, shadowing people, sometimes self-taught. Obviously, more self-taught when the kind of caveat of obviously I can go watch a YouTube video, and obviously a wonderful time to be self-taught is now because any question you have, any course you want to find, any book you want to find, go find it and read it. When it comes to text, um, a book I love and was actually a strange book for me to give me, I guess, inspiration and support in kind of my creative journey, both as a writer, as a filmmaker, is Stephen King's book on writing. It's actually one of my favorite books. I feel like every couple of years I read it. It's a super easy read. It's from one of the masters. I'm a huge Stephen King fan in general, read a lot of the Stephen King books. And you talk about the master of IP, and it's kind of in the language that he speaks about the art of writing, the relationship he has with it, the uphill battles. And there was something about after reading that book, you kind of walk away from it and kind of go, I can do this. Like I can do this, and like that's a wonderful feeling to have. And I just think from a purely, almost kind of top down look at that entire process. And again, it doesn't have to just be writing. There is some solace in hearing it from a man who's written hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
books, massive pages per word in his lifetime. But his eloquence in how he describes it is just well worth the read. And I tell a lot of people that. I've had a lot of people go, "What's a good writing book? What's a good writing book?" Go read On Writing by Stephen
Yeah.
King. Find it anywhere. I think you probably find it online if you want to find it for free. And then I read a book a little while ago, which was called, I think it's called The Art of War,
Yeah.
War on Art, War of Art. I'm sorry, I'm probably slaughtering it. It's one of those two. I can get you the exact spelling on it. Another really great kind of um, take on exactly as it sounds, kind of the art of creativity and kind of the negative battle you have with your inner self. Your inner critic is more of a thing that it's kind of pulling out and dissecting. And I absolutely loved the language in it. And it's just another kind of thing that's, really kind of behind you and supporting you in this, tough creative journey. Again, whether you're going to go make a movie or you're going to write a movie, the biggest hurdle is yourself, to get it done because you're your hardest critic. And the way the book breaks down just kind of how it has been throughout time, through all the great artists and the great artwork, it's a continual struggle that always happens with every artist. And I liked the kind of philosophical breakdown of how the artist talked about it.
Yeah, I love I've read both of those. So
Amazing.
on writing was really good. What's cool is if you're listening to this, what I really liked about the book is like the first half is like a autobiography, and then the second half is all about like the writing and the actual pen to paper and how to do it and
Yeah.
what he does and this whole process. And so the first half, because he's a wizard at storytelling, was so captivating and compelling, and then you get into like the real brass tacks of it. It's just an enjoyable book because it's almost like two in one that you're getting
Great
from.
way to put it. Yeah. It's his signature style of just talking and telling a story, but it's the kind of nuts and bolts that you're truly interested in, you know? And I love that with any artist that's willing to put it on the page. And I mean, those are just two books, but as you are has have mentioned being an avid reader, there's so much great stuff out there. It doesn't have to be a how-to book. It can even be an autobiography of a creative person. And I am always into the tidbits of little gems of knowledge that people can give you. I was saying to a friend a couple days ago, I miss physical media and DVDs, and I remember just absolutely eating up like behind the scenes commentaries
Of
when they
course.
existed. And you talk about free film school, just sitting,
Yep.
watching, being like, I can't believe James Cameron is talking to me for an hour and a half about how he
Right.
made The Abyss, you know?
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings, Peter
Oh my
Jackson did
God.
it right. I
Yeah.
mean, they spent, it seemed like just as much time on the behind the scenes. I mean, not only did it get me addicted to Lord of the Rings, so much so that I flew to New Zealand,
Oh
but it,
wow.
it also, really did help spur that storytelling, almost like what you were saying earlier, like, oh, wow, I think I can do this, like
Right.
through their eyes.
It's inspiration. And you know, that's what we're all trying to do daily, right? You're trying to conjure inspiration. If it's inspiration to keep going or it's just inspiration to start creating, like yeah, read some books. If you don't like to read, just watch some stuff. Again, it I wish this existed when I was kind of coming up. There was a little bit more of a hardship in finding that kind of stuff, but oh my God, I mean, it's amazing. What a treasure trove available to people that just want
Yeah.
to hear sage advice or knowledge from professionals.
No, and they're at the top of the game. Who's out there making stuff that you love right now? Who are you a fan of?
Yeah, let me think who's out there making stuff that I love. Yeah, I mean, from a, I guess from a standpoint of more popular filmmakers, and kind of, I really like the Safdie brothers, and I know I don't know if they're always going to stay a brother unit. They're both branching off and doing their own things, in their own regards. But their films in the past few years have really just had a very particular vibe that I really liked, and I thought to myself, like, these are people that are just like unabashedly pushing a style out there, kind of not caring about what critics are saying or whatever. I love that. I kind of love that real kind of powerful stance as a filmmaker. Like you're going to get this, and if you don't like it, then try my next movie. Their stuff feels like that. And I know again they have broken off into kind of two different sects of filmmaking, but I'm excited to see as they become bigger filmmakers. Like, do you keep the allure? Are you going to be changed by the big budgets and the big actors coming into your work? But again, they probably excite me. And then I'm in a cool position where, like, my company, we work on a lot of independent film, and a lot of these independent films that we're working on are really getting ready to go out to festival distribution, right? So right now we're working on some Tribeca films. We had a big run where we were doing South by and Sundance, and I love seeing stuff that maybe other people aren't going to see yet. And I'm like, oh, it's exciting because this person really took advantage of this opportunity. Their voice is very much in this work, and now they're going to put it out to the world. It's always exciting to go, is this person the next up and coming fad that's going to break through in the independent
Yeah.
market? And again, there's probably too many to name, but I do think it's an exciting time, and I can't wait to see more of that happening
Yeah,
in
no,
the
that's
world.
got to be like almost like you're an insider that knows a secret that nobody else knows. It's got to be cool. What are you working on next, and where can listeners connect with you and or support your work?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say I'm ramping up a personal project or working on my own independent film. I have a couple things that I again I like to think of myself as a hobbyist writer, so I love to write. Maybe someday one of those things will materialize. But I mean, I work full time for my company, Nice Shoes. You can go to niceshoes.com, see all the work that we have done. Again, we work in both major film and television, and very much so in the independent scene. Again, I think there's going to be some cool films that I really can't name as of now that should be releasing. I know two of our films that we worked on at Sundance were acquired for distribution, and yeah, but now we get to look forward to the Tribeca run of things. But that's where you'll find me. I'm an executive producer there in our film and episodic department, and I just kind of work day to day on post production finishing. Again, for up and coming filmmakers and films that I hope uh, make it and hope get the eyeballs on them that they deserve.
Can I give you one thought, man, to think about from like, I try to write as best as I can, as much as I can, but I have a great writing partner. We've been taking our scripts and because I feel like you're already like 60, 70% there, and because of the IP thing too, we're turning them into books. So
Yeah.
if you haven't tried that venture yet, I would
Oh,
encourage you to consider that because it is a
huh.
you unveil this whole cool world as a screenwriter, but then you are bound within the 90 pages. And
Yeah.
suddenly, in a narrative of a novel, 50,000 words, it's way more open space to kind of develop in. And it did kind of push me in a good way creatively. So I'd encourage you to consider that.
That's incredible, man. That's absolutely incredible. And again, I mean, I do think IP, as everyone's saying, IP is king. And man, if you have an incredible story, uh, and you can expand outside of the perimeters of, like you're saying, a 90 pages or whatever, I mean, go for it. I mean, that's the ultimate exploration of your creativity is to have no limits.
That's it. I love it, man. Well, Tom, I appreciate you so much for joining me. I thank you all for watching and listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment to let me know that anybody's out there and this is helping because it does help the channel. And I believe, though, we are good to go to conclude our discussion with Tom Barile. And just remember, nothing is wasted.